Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the fifth and the final episode of the Resonant Heart, the mini-series. My name is Nela Trifkovic, and before we start, I would love to acknowledge that we meet and stream from the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects and give honor to the traditional custodians of the land. Tonight, my guest was actually an MC for the day we met. It's my great pleasure to introduce Lizzy Kuoth, a young artist, activist, cultural leader, and all-around Wonder Woman, in my opinion. And it's a really, really amazing honor to actually be swapping roles and to be in this position. Welcome to the show, Lizzy.
Thank you, Nela, and welcome everyone who's joining us this evening. I'm privileged and feeling honored to be here with you today, virtually. And yeah, I'm just really excited to share some personal stories and just really connect with the world.
Beautiful, thank you. The way I met Lizzy was about 8 months ago during the Refugee Week in the city of Monash, performing with my ensemble. Lizzy was the MC of our event, and we struck kind of an immediate friendship and somehow recognized and saw each other. But in preparation to this program, when I started researching her young life, I was really struck by how many hats you wear, Lizzy, and just how many things you're involved in and passionately involved in, and really advocating, creating, change making. I don't even know where to start, so I will start in a very open way because I'm a big fan, as you know. Tell us about yourself from whichever angle you wish. I would just love to know what makes you tick and pursue all those things that you do.
Thank you, Nela. When I read your question, I was really, it was such a beautiful, the way you worded the question was so beautiful. Because when I think about my life, and think about the people that have impacted me the most and where I was and where I am today, you know, it really comes down to people, you know, people that loved me, people that saw in me potential, and not just that, but people that really pushed me towards that goal, and really realizing that this is a young woman that we think deserves, you know, our appreciation, deserves our love, deserves our opportunities. So for me, that's really what my story is about. You know, it's about someone who's open to opportunities, someone who's from a very young age, you know, was faced with really difficult, challenging trauma, you know, losing my mother at the age of 5, who was a single mother at the time. And today, you know, I'm representing Victorian multicultural communities wearing my multicultural commissioner hat. So it's a story both of, you know, one of strive, but also one with where I feel like I've become victorious, and I'm not going to take the credit for it, because I really deeply believe that, you know, it's those in my life who really saw me and saw in me need, you know, to serve the community, desire and passion to be someone better and continuing to grow, not someone who wanted to let circumstances define who I am, but really someone who acknowledges that life is at times very difficult and challenging, but those that are around us are the ones that really, you know, help us throughout that hard, difficult time and really bring us to the light, you know. And I just really, again, I'm going to take this moment to really, again, also thank the Resonant Heart team, because when I was sick a couple of weeks ago with COVID, you know, you guys came through, you know, you bought me food, and, you know, and you and Nella calling me every day, sending me messages, you know, to know that, you know, I've met you not long ago, and here you are. I see you as a sister, someone who really cares about my well-being. I think it's the most beautiful thing, and I appreciate that. And for me, that's where my story lies. You know, it's about the people I'm connected with, my passion for community, you know, my story of refugee background, and my story that's unfolding of being Australian African young woman. So it's just, you know, there's so many. I could talk about, you know, my schooling. I could talk about this and that, but really I feel like in the end, really what defines me are people that are in my life.
Thank you. That's a gorgeous way of, connecting into the larger whole and really sharing collectivism while also sharing insight about yourself. I really appreciate your perspective on being influenced by others and pursuing. And I would love to see that more in our communities amongst young people, from all diasporas, from yours, from mine, because sometimes it's that collectivism that
Absolutely.
either feels like too stifling or ends up missing, or it's beautiful to hear you speak of that collectivism with a positive effect. And I really love that.
Thanks, Nela.
I would love to zoom in on something more specific that kind of comes in from this question. When you and I met, it was in a context of sort of celebration of overcoming resilience, survival, all those ideas of coming from a refugee background, but that not being the story that defines us and sort of limits us, but always just being our starting story. With the Resonant Heart, what I really looked for and loved finding in our friendship when we met is I look for spaces for creative women to meet, because we are too often sort of too separated by circumstance, whether we're mothers or not, whether we're sisters, whether we're partners, there seems to be a particular way in which women get super busy. And at times at the expenses of connections with each other is what I've experienced in particular. And so I would really love to just go back and ask if you're open to sharing a little bit about some of the significant women that have influenced your life. Like you mentioned the legacy of your mother, even though she was around for a short time, but it seems to have really given you this knack for connecting with women.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Spot on. Like, look, I ask people, I ask my family about my mother. I ask my, extended family members, my wider inward community who knew my mother. And everyone who spoke of my mother spoke highly of my mother. In fact, sometimes I'm envious of the fact that they were privileged enough to have known her, and sort of me missing out on this beautiful person who obviously seemed to have really impacted their lives positively. But look, for me, I would say my biggest role model is, in fact, my mother's mother, my grandmother. She's someone that really was there for me since day one, like since mom was there. Grandmother was my best friend. Like, I was always with my grandmother. I was always in her lap. She would be feeding me, a sandwich, really, what is it called? Peanut butter sandwich. And that was like my favorite. You would imagine Sudan, a young child, she would shove it down my throat and just really just wanted to feed me and make sure I'm always, eating. And I think that's why I love our elders. They're always wanting the best for us and feeding us. And I think food is, like, by far, I would say, the most beautiful love language, when someone cooks you food or, feeds you. And I think for me, those are like the memory of my grandmother, her, raising me up in a very challenging situation, and her doing her absolute best to ensure that I don't go to bed hungry. And that included her working as a maid. You could imagine an old woman, who took on a role that she really didn't have to, but the circumstances and her love for us. And so I think for me, growing up and seeing my grandmother work so hard just to make sure that I don't go to bed hungry really inspired me and made me admire her strength. And also, she was just really positive energy. She had this belief that, that my life could be better. And that's the reason why I came to Australia, because if she didn't have that perspective or that desire, I feel like I would have actually been one of those unfortunate kids that are, that grew up being, let's say, married early and live a very tragic life, because it's quite tragic, to live in poverty and raise the kids of your own in that situation. So I'm really, I give like a lot of, I'm so grateful for what my grandma has done, not just raising me up and ensuring that I don't go hungry, but really having that foresight to leave her country, to cross seas to bring me to opportunities. So I absolutely love her. My grandmother's name is Nyaluak Hoth, and she was one of the 5 sisters. They didn't have a brother. And in my culture, if you don't have a brother, people take advantage of you, and during her time, wealth is it's cows. And usually cows are really, when a woman gets married, she's married off, their dowries is usually in cows, and cows is your wealth. And when you're a woman, they take that from you. Your cousins who are male will take that wealth. And she became the male in her family. She became the person that took on that role that says, you're not going to disadvantage us because you don't have a brother. And I think me seeing that, made me really admire the strength women bring, because you don't only just bring, give birth, but we really raise people, and we know when to step up, to really look after our people. And for me, that's my grandmother. She looked after me.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. You're an incredible tribute to your grandmother. And what I'm really struck with, well, the most immediate resonance is that my closest friend was my mother's mother.
Love that story.
Yeah, in fact, I still refer to her as my first soulmate.
Oh, same.
Like, I think, in a completely non-romantic, as a small child who had no idea about romance or any of those things, I do really believe that she was the first experience of a soulmate for me.
Me too, honestly. Like, I get where you're coming from. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And but what I particularly love sharing with people and hearing in your story, and I hope many of our listeners from many different diasporas will recognize, is that we're doing these new things. We're doing things in the Australian context, in cultural leadership, or in my case, in performance. But often the instigators and the inspirations, they had something else, not necessarily tertiary education. They had the energy of grace, the spirit, the ability to connect. And I find it really important to repeat this time and time again, because immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, all the people that come from the unknown to this world are almost too easily dismissed if they're not conventionally recognizable on these terms as valuable.
Exactly. And and can I just also add, story really matter. In growing up, stories for me were where I was able to reimagine a different life for myself. And I think from the culture that I've come from, that's how we pass on, cultural knowledge, wisdom, values. So really, stories define us in so many ways. And for me, I think my grandmother told positive stories. She told stories of strong women, and she told stories of overcoming challenges, and story of just really enjoying life. My grandmother was really one of those gorgeous, tall, elegant women, and she would share her stories when she was young, and just really enjoying her youth. And I think often we forget those beautiful stories. We so focus on the challenges that people face that we forget, actually, people like me, we've had a really great, there's also that other aspect where life is actually quite beautiful, and it doesn't have to be so always, focusing on the negative, because I feel like the beautiful aspect of life, as small as they may be, they're really important. And I just wanted to highlight that as well. And I think through stories, I'm often reminded of those as well. So I'm not always looking at myself like, oh, the refugee girl.
Yeah, that's beautiful. In Bosnian culture, there's a saying, like, and it's actually shared in very rural parts, sometimes even where people have, until just 50 years ago or so, maybe even lived without electricity. But the saying is, let's talk about a time when life was a miracle.
Oh, I love that.
And you might be sitting in an open field or sitting around fire, but the provocation was, talk about the time when life was a miracle, so that life may become a miracle.
Because that's where healing can begin, I feel, even.
Well, it's about I feel that the thing that I recognized in my sort of short but warm friendship with you is that we really share that thing, that the stories of our minds do become the prophecy of our lives.
Oh yeah, Absolutely. Yeah. You're looking at someone who reads a lot of books on, I really love philosophy and, because I've just been that person who cares about the big picture, the why I'm here, why life, why this, why ends. Like since I was a child, I was always fascinated by life and just the big questions. So I think, yeah, those are the things. And I think it's good to finally know that sometimes it's good to be content with the circumstance you're in and just really enjoy life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for the great message.
Thanks.
One of the most prominent things that came up when I was studying you to prepare for my interview was your fierce work in cultural leadership, obviously, for a young woman of your age, that you've really kind of gone into it full steam. And can you say a little bit more about that in these changing times, and times where we're really trying to articulate and not just create, but also understand representation and understand how to express ourselves and incorporate all aspects of ourselves in this space? Can you say a little bit more about what led you to cultural leadership, or did you sort of fall into it? How did that all come about?
Yeah, look, I often ask myself, like, oh, how did all this, honestly, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined where I am today. That's the honest truth, But one thing I know is I've always have had heart for service. And for me, leadership is something that it was a role that I didn't aspire. I just literally, I think I would say I fell into leadership, and because I saw the impact, and I have this thing where I really want to make a positive impact in my life. One of my goals is to leave a positive mark that can't be erased, and that's a huge purpose to, it's almost sounds egoistic in a way. You want to be this important person that leaves a mark in people's life. But that's me, because I think for me, when my grandmother left such a, her imprint in my heart, it's the most beautiful thing, because to this day, I lost my grandmother back in 2010, and to this day, those conversations that I've had with her, our memories together, her sacrifices, have really enabled me to have a really humble outlook in life, and realizing that sometimes what you do for people actually will matter. It might not matter today, but it will matter. In the long run, that impact, that small thing you were doing, it would probably be the biggest thing you've done in someone's life. Yeah. And I think for me, that's where it began. It began from home, seeing that my grandmother, showed me a heart of service. I think that lit a fire in me, to really be that person that, you meet on the street with a smile on her face, and whether you say the meanest thing or not, I'm just gonna really still remember that, I really like that saying that says, treat people the way you want to be treated, and I think often we forget, when someone says the meanest thing, you just want to be even meaner than that, and that really doesn't resolve things. So for me, the community service is because I care about beautiful outcomes. I care about changing people's life for the positive, because someone has changed my life for the positive. And it began as a young person, who was frustrated. I came to Australia as a refugee. I was 13, 14. I didn't speak a word of English, and I'd go to places and I would often be met with really aggressive vibe, and I didn't really understand where that came from. And I think for me, I wanted to know, like I told you, I'm someone who I question myself. I'm a very inward looking person, where if someone says something, I would want to understand, have I done something that really, that made them treat me in this way, and I think for me, that's where my advocacy work began, because I realized, we all have, we all deserving of respect. We all came to this country, people, we came different means, but in the end, we all making a living here, and you want a comfortable life. You don't want life to be a struggle. And I think for me, speaking up, sharing my stories, it matters to me, because I want the next generation to not have to face what I'm facing today. Things like racism, they're things of yesterday. It's really unfortunate that these are still topics that impact people, and that things that are people still struggling with. Yeah, but for me, really, I think the two reasons why I began my advocacy work is literally my heart of service. I really do see the value in helping people. And because someone once said, to always be positive.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And having experienced you as an MC, now it really makes sense. Like, I'm putting little pieces of puzzle together from the few times that we had together. Now that you've taken up a little bit more of that work, and you often find yourself at events such as the Refugee Week concert at which we met as a guest MC, could we look at your emceeing a little bit? That's also what you will be doing in the Resonant Heart in the upcoming live show in March.
Yes.
So are there, obviously you have this internal drive and what you describe as the heart of service, but are there any particular influences amongst, authors or performers or philosophers, or, who are your MC kind of influences that have informed?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I wouldn't say MC influences, but rather I would say individuals. I really, I'm sure like many people who admire Maya Angelou, I admire her for the piece and just the way she was able to really reimagine herself. That's a radical act. And for me, people that really I admire are people that actually they break that, that social, they put you in a box. They're like, no, I'm just gonna, redefine who I am because my values are this. And really, for me, those are the people that really inspire me, which is the reason why I don't belong in it. I don't do specific things like emceeing. For me, I don't do it because I want to be an MC. I do it as a chance to connect with other people, because I love hearing people's stories. I love being someone who meets new people. For me, emceeing is another way to be part of the community. I don't do it professionally. In fact, the Monash event thing, I was doing it in a voluntary basis because I really love the work that City of Monash does, bringing communities together. I love that, and for me, I want to be where there's that positive vibe, where people come together. And the skills just come out of nowhere. I mean, I haven't trained any emceeing skills. I just do it because I believe that it's the right thing to do.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You saying I don't train anywhere actually brings me to my next question. Maybe you did train in the School of Life. That's how I would describe it, as a trained artist. But
I would just honestly say I'm that kind of person that just says, yes, I'll do that. Okay, and then Google, how do you do that? Serious. Yeah. So when they said, Lizzie, would you love to MC this event? I'm like, I love the idea of, people coming together, musicians, and that really introduced me to your music, because otherwise I would have not heard of, of you guys. Like, imagine, like, and I was really like, whoa, this is the most beautiful sounding music. And I went around sharing it to my friends, letting them know that you guys exist. So I think those are the things that really, for me, moved me towards opportunities, because it opens doors that you just, it opens you to new things and beautiful. I love music. And, and for me, like the way I love stories, I think music speaks to my soul. When I'm feeling down, I'm like, music. And your music was another level in terms of touching my soul, because I grew up in listening to Arabic music. And for you, it was like a bit of mixture. So it's folk music, Arabic. I was just like, oh my God, this is beautiful. So for me, even that would be the highlight, Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, the highlight, or one really particular moment, was as somebody who is heavily performance trained in all sorts of aspects, the thing that really fascinated me about your work, both with the Resonant Heart when you worked with Sarita, but also when we first met, is this gorgeous knack for the ceremonious, for the effortlessly ritualistic way of just leading this procession, leading the conversation to unravel, and opening up the space and holding the space for your co-speaker, but as well also for yourself to go deeper throughout the process of the interview or the performance or whatever you're participating in. And I couldn't help but think about, the importance of rituals in my life and upbringing. And I just wanted to ask, if I may ask, from that sort of connected point of connecting to you, Can you say a little bit more about the importance of rituals in your background, whether it's your life, whether it's specific to your culture or just to your family?
Yeah. Excuse me, I'm just gonna cough. I've been holding it in. Thank you. Me, so I'm a South Sudanese, and for us, I've come from a culture or country that has 64 different tribes, and each tribe is, what makes each tribe's unique. I would say it's their rituals, it's their traditions, ritual in dancing, ritual in marriage, ritual in prayers, ritual in even their way of life, and I think for me, growing up in a very native, or a culture that is really just based on stories that are passed on, because that's also in itself is a ritual, because every event, there's a particular way of doing it. Let's say, if the child's born, there's a particular way of welcoming that child into the world. If you're having your first child, this ritual in every activity. And I think for me, I almost saw ritual as the norm. I didn't really, I would say I didn't really, growing up as a child, you take things for granted. Coming to this country, as a first generation South Sudanese, a lot of this stuff have actually, unfortunately, I would say, withered away, because growing up here, I'm so isolated, from my community, and the things that I should have known or would love to know about, my culture and the deep tradition, and why the rituals. But it's just, I was just born into it, and basically, so that, for instance, for us, baits are really, they have significant part in our lives. I remember as a child, I'd be wearing a wide bead around my neck and around my waist, and that's the belief is, it will protect me from his evil spirits. So there's meaning with everything, and nothing is taken for granted. Everything is, it's sort of really ingrained in a deeper, deep-seated meaning. But unfortunately, with wars and with sort of just really not being in sort of growing up in that knowledge, you kind of just lose that knowledge. And my desire really, I would hope that there will be places for the elderly people to really impart that wisdom, that tradition, so that people really, and people like myself, understand our culture. Yeah, because I've lived home when I was a child and grew up as a refugee, far away from home, and when I came to Australia, the one thing in mind was to learn English, and to fit in. And I think in all that, you lose that, you lose that part of yourself. And I think that perhaps is the saddest part of my story. Yeah.
Is there a way, like, are you hoping to travel back to that part of the world, or like, do you have any plans of looking for a way to reconnect for yourself? Is there a community here for you, a community that has elders, or would it take a trip back home?
It would take a trip back home. It would take a trip back home, yeah, because it's so many challenges, Nela, in this country, with people really just integrating. It's quite hard and challenging for people. And being a first generation immigrant, for me, a lot of the hard work, like a lot of the groundwork, really starts with me. And it's usually to do with fitting into your new host country. You want to, and that means really neglecting that part of yourself. Yeah, but for me, I think the bigger purpose would be, to really see if there's a way to really bring that knowledge back here to kids that are born here, because I think it's so important to really know your root. It doesn't mean you're forgetting your identity as Australian, but I think it actually makes you even more of a whole person. That's my belief. It's probably radical, but I think, having that grounded self-awareness of who you are and your root and your history, I feel like really grounds you. And it actually makes you the best person, the best version of yourself, because you're walking around the world, you have root, and you're rooted. And that really, I feel it's important. And I feel it's missing in some parts of the world.
Absolutely. I can wholeheartedly identify and recognize, and as someone who's had those challenges, as well as having the challenge of the country of my birth changing a lot, like, being born in Yugoslavia disappearing, now being Bosnian, who is Bosnian, what is Bosnian. But I certainly remember as a child who, you know, worked really hard to study, to integrate, whatever that means. When we came, neither my mother nor grandmother could speak English. So I was the interpreter and the lens into the world, linguistically speaking, from the time when I was 16. And I remember being about 20, going back to the Balkans for the first time and going, right, everyone else has learned some English in the family. Now I go and learn folk singing.
Oh, wow. I think I should do that, Nela. That's a really, thank you for inspiring me. Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that that's why I was doing that. You know, I didn't say that as rationally as I'm articulating it to you now, in a way. And this is the magic for me of talking with you. I've just realized something. Like, I remember just going, Mum's got enough English, Grandma's got some English. Let me just do one thing for myself, because I was so I'm just going to go and learn some folk singing.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And look where you are today. It's just amazing. You know, I'm glad you made that decision, because you're a beautiful singer. Absolutely beautiful.
Well, I look forward to following your journey and seeing, you know, we're experiencing whether you come back as a South Sudanese dancer, storyteller, singer, probably all of them.
I don't look, that's a bit, okay. I did sort of put out there that I'm the yes woman. Okay, so I'm just gonna try my best, but look, don't expect, maybe just lower expectation a bit.
Oh, you never know. I'm very happy to come as the fairy godmother. I'll be the queen woman.
Love it. Let's do this. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Nela.
So on that creatively inspired note, I would love to turn to our collaboration, which is really now just unraveling towards the Resonant Heart event. So now you've had a bit of a chance to meet, you know, you've met my group, you've met Sarita, you're about to meet Elnaz and Vahida, but now that you know a little bit about the group and you've shared all these journeys with us, would you love to share with our listeners what you would like to, I don't want to say achieve perhaps, but explore in your participation in Resonant Heart?
Yeah.
What's the space, the dreaming space for you?
Yeah, look, again, you know, I really love the idea of storytelling, and really, again, reimagining ourselves, not just through the lens of our past life and our present life, but I feel like, you know, where these two meet, you know, and I think that's where art comes in, because art allows you to be creative and imaginary about who you could become. And that's why I appreciate art so much, because it's really, it gives people different perspective without needing to have special skills. Like, you don't need to have a degree to imagine yourself something, but that's where you can begin, you know, a new way of seeing yourself. And I think, you know, I'm quite privileged to be in this country, because everything really is possible, because opportunities are there. And I think for me, you know, reaching people through stories, helping people reimagining themselves, you know, because every waking moment of our lives is a chance, you know, to have a lovelier dream. Because I think a human's desire, you know, is not to suffer. I don't think. I think it's a tragic that we do suffer, but I think for us, in the end, really what matters to us is that moment of happiness. And I think if this will bring people joy, I think it's such a wonderful thing to be a part of it.
Beautiful, thank you. That I love that idea. One of the things that I love about being an independent artist the most is a little kind of almost a motto that a friend shared with me a long time ago, you know, when we realized that we weren't Australian born and we weren't going to necessarily be in a mainstream work or on a big stage. And she said, but we can ignite our ordinary lives with the magic of our art.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm talking about. That's like spot on. Because like, who said you can't? Like, who dares gonna come and be like, no, you can't do that? It's like, nah, this is my dream space.
Absolutely, great. And to finish, I would just love to ask you.
Finish? No way. I'm enjoying this, Nela. Okay.
Me too.
I guess we all have lives to live, things to do, dreams to dream. Okay, sure. But I've enjoyed this.
I can throw in some more questions. I was going to finish in this one, but if the audience is going no deal, I'll keep going. But I would love you to tell our audiences a little bit about, you know, what's coming up for you, what projects or what advocacy, or what are you working on? I know we're all working mainly on in some way recovery and returning into the world. And what are you looking towards?
Yeah, look, to be honest, my two main goals currently, for me, because I was recently appointed as Victorian Multicultural Commission, and for me, I'm really, I take this with so much gratitude, because it's something that I really care about. It enables me to be able to speak to key people and to really not necessarily make things happen, but working towards making things happen. And I really want to sort of really pour myself in that role, because I think it's really, it's a 4-year commitment, but I want to really, again, I want to feel like when I look back after 4 years, I want to feel like I've made an impact, however small. So, and that would require me, really connecting with our diverse communities and really getting closer to the roots of the issues and seeing ways to, work together towards resolving them. So that's a big thing that I'm really, I want to focus on. And I also really want to finish my studies, because I've over the years when I was young, with my grandmother passing away, I ended up becoming my siblings' guardian, and that was a 5-year sort of full-time parenting role. But for me, education, it's like important to me. I believe people that say education is the key to, like, changing your life, really, opportunities wise, or even just really being able to make more impact in the community or in the world. So for me, I really want to finish my business and economics major, because I really want to start just working in that space, because I've only got one life, and I don't want to keep putting things in the back end. I feel like my 30s is the time to tick goals, so I could just tick them off and be like, I did that. And I think for me is to just, I've done my degree, I was awesome as VMC commissioner. I've connected with communities. Those are the two things that I'm really, I really want to focus on and do the most work.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's quite a lot.
Okay.
Even though it's just two
I was
things,
gonna list more. I was just gonna say, well, also then there's that and that. But
please keep going. Yeah.
No. It's all right. That's all right. Yeah, but I mean, I love to still connect with you, Nela, because I love music. I love poetry. I do write poetry. For me, poetry is a space where I can be vulnerable. I can be honest with myself, and just really, for me, poetry, it's a love language for me. It's not just about cute boy, but it's just how life can be nice, and how you can really reframe challenges in poetry. It just gives you different perspective that I love. And so for me, being part of the art scenery is definitely, because that's where my heart is sparked. Art sparks my heart and gives me energy to do the other things that I also care about.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, you've certainly sparked our hearts in this conversation, and I really look forward to experiencing your poetry, and warmly invite you to share it in the context of our work.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Lizzie will be a part of this group. You will meet her again on the 13th of March in our live event. The live event will take place at the Music Market, Collingwood Yards on Johnson Street, and tickets are already open for sale. This particular event can be attended both in person as well as followed from the comfort of your home, as it will be live streamed. And we look forward to connecting with you all. And thank you so much once again, Lizzie, for an extraordinary journey. It always is when I talk to you. Thank you.
So much, Nela. Much love.
Much love to you too. Thank you to all our audiences. Stay safe and well. We will see you on the 13th of March.